My name is Isabella Brown. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that if you loved someone hard enough, it would eventually be enough to hold everything together. I used to think love was about patience, understanding compromise. Now I know it's also about boundaries. When I first met Daniel, I thought I'd finally found someone who balanced me. He was 29 magnetic in that easygoing way that drew people in without effort. We met through mutual friends at a cozy rooftop party, dim lights, soft music, laughter that floated just above the city hum. I was the grounded one, the software developer who always planned ahead, the kind who kept her savings organized and future mapped out in spreadsheets. Daniel, on the other hand, was the energy the marketer with charm in his eyes and chaos in his smile. He once told me, "You make me feel safe," and I believed him. For the first couple of years, we were solid. I loved our little apartment with the chipped balcony rail and the overwatered succulents. When he got laid off from his first job after college, I didn't even hesitate. I covered rent for months, handled groceries, cooked, cleaned, even stayed up late, helping him tweak his portfolio and reapply for positions. He used to kiss my forehead and whisper, "You're my rock." I thought that meant something permanent. When he finally got a new job marketing for a local events firm, it felt like our balance was returning. But something subtle shifted after that. Daniel started dressing differently, trendier, louder colors, expensive watches that didn't fit our budget. I told myself it was confidence, not vanity. I wanted to be proud of him. Then came Hannah. She was his ex from college, the kind of girl who looked like she belonged in photographs. Big laugh, effortless charm. Perfectly messy hair. I only knew her through the stories he told me once early in our relationship. He said they were young and reckless, and that she'd broken his heart when she left him for someone else. So when her name popped up again, "Oh, just bumped into Hannah at a work mixer," I didn't think much of it. At least not at first. It started small, a coffee catch-up, then a few group outings. I tried to be supportive. People can be friends with their exes, right? But then those group nights turned into clubbing. Daniel loved that world, the lights, the energy, the music pulsing through the floorboards. I didn't mind staying home. I liked quiet evenings, warm tea, my coding projects. But one morning I opened social media and saw a photo Daniel in a booth, laughing, Hannah's arm slung over his shoulders. The caption read, "Nights out with old friends hit different." The comments were full of flames and hearts. My stomach dropped. When I asked him about it, he just grinned. "You're not jealous, are you? Come on, it's harmless." That word harmless stuck in my head. But the weeks blurred. Late nights turned into later mornings. The smell of alcohol lingered on his clothes when he stumbled in humming some tune from the club. I told myself I was overreacting, but the quiet hours alone started to weigh heavier each night. One Friday he texted, "Heading out with the crew tonight. Hannah's DJing. Don't wait up." The message hit like cold water. When he came home to change, I was sitting on the couch laptop, still open, half pretending to finish my project. He was in front of the mirror, adjusting his shirt, spraying cologne that used to make my heart skip. "Daniel," I said quietly, "can we talk before you go?" He looked at me through the mirror. "About what? The club again?" "It's not the club," I said evenly. "It's who you're going with." "Hannah. Every weekend now. It feels off." He laughed, a light, careless sound that made me feel small. "Oh my God, seriously. You shouldn't be insecure that I go out with my ex. We're friends, Bella. That's all. If you trusted me, this wouldn't be an issue." I swallowed hard. This isn't about trust. It's about respect, about boundaries. You're out with someone you used to date, posting pictures that look like... He turned, cutting me off. "Boundaries. You're sounding controlling now. Hannah and I have history, sure, but that's ancient. She's got connections in my industry. Networking, you know? Besides, you hate clubs half the time. You'd be miserable there." I felt the words hit sharp and deliberate. "You'd be miserable there." So what I asked quietly, "I'm boring now. Predictable." He smirked. "Not boring, just safe, reliable. I love that about you. But sometimes I need a little more energy in my life. Hannah's fun. It's harmless." There it was again, harmless. I forced a smile even as my chest burned. If that's harmless, then what's disrespect? He sighed dramatically, checking his reflection again. "You're overthinking everything, Bella. Maybe you should come along tonight. Loosen up a bit." I shook my head. "No, I've got an early meeting. But maybe think about how this looks from my side." He grabbed his jacket. "I have thought about it. You're just being dramatic." Grow a little thicker skin. Yeah, life's too short for jealousy drama. And just like that, he was gone. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway. I sat there frozen. The apartment felt colder than usual. The smell of his cologne lingered long after the door shut. That night, I didn't cry. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. I thought about every time I'd put his happiness before mine. Every dream I'd postponed for us, including that job offer last year, a promotion that would have meant relocating to a quiet coastal town. I turned it down because Daniel said city life was our thing. But as I lay there, the thought wouldn't leave me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too safe, too predictable. Or maybe I was just with someone who mistook stability for weakness. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old photos, beach sunsets, snapshots from our early days, when he still looked at me like I was his world. Now it all felt like a distant version of us, like a movie I'd already seen and knew the ending to. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to walk away, not out of anger, but peace. Because sometimes the loudest breakups happen in silence. That night I realized respect can disappear without a single fight. The next few days felt like living underwater, every sound muffled, every moment distorted. Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He came home late, humming club beats under his breath, his shirt smelling faintly of sweat and perfume. I'd ask, "How was your night?" and he'd shrug. "Fine, just dancing." But the air between us thickened. Conversations turned shallow. Dinner turned into silence. I started noticing little things, how he'd lock his phone when I walked by, how he'd scroll with that faint half-smile reserved for messages he didn't want me to see. I didn't want to be that woman, the one who snoops through her partner's phone, so I didn't. Instead, I replayed everything in my mind, his tone, his words, his laughter, whenever Hannah's name came up. It wasn't jealousy that hollowed me out. It was humiliation. One night, I sat alone on the balcony, the city buzzing below, the air sticky and warm. My laptop glowed with unfinished code, but my thoughts kept drifting. I remembered how Daniel once said, "You're the only constant I need." Funny how people only say that when they're already chasing something else. He came out from the shower towel slung around his waist, scrolling through his phone with a grin. "Hey, Hannah's DJing again next Friday," he said casually. "You should come this time." "Why would I asked, my voice soft but steady. He looked up, smirking. "Because you're always complaining that we don't do things together." "I'm not complaining," I said. "I'm just noticing how you keep making plans that don't include me." He rolled his eyes. "Bella, not everything's about you." That sentence, short, sharp, almost dismissive, cut through whatever was left of my patience. I walked past him toward the bedroom. "No," I said quietly. "It never is." That night I lay in bed pretending to sleep when he slipped in hours later, whispering apologies into my hair, his breath reeking of whiskey and guilt. I didn't move. By morning my mind was made up. I brewed coffee in silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy with decision. The light filtering through the blinds looked different, colder, maybe clearer. Daniel stumbled in, yawning, muttering something about how late it got. I just nodded. As he sat at the table, scrolling through his phone again, I realized he hadn't even looked at me once. It was strange being invisible to someone who once memorized your every detail. He left for work around 9, kissed the top of my head as a formality. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for months. I opened my laptop, but not for work this time. I searched flights. The destination was already in my head before I typed it: Seabrook, the small coastal town I'd once dreamed of moving to when that job offer came in last year. I could still hear the recruiter's voice. "You'd love it here, quiet, creative ocean breeze all year round." Daniel had laughed at the idea. "You'd get bored in a week," he said. Maybe I would have back then, but not anymore. The cursor blinked beside the one-way option. My finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling just a little. I thought about everything I'd invested 3 years shared rent memories that used to feel unbreakable. Then I thought about the way he'd said, "You're too safe." I clicked book flight. Departure, Sunday morning, 7:30 a.m. 2 days. I closed the laptop and leaned back, heart pounding, not with fear, but relief. That evening, Daniel came home unusually early, probably sensing the distance. He brought takeout and wine, acting like nothing had changed. "Truce dinner," he joked, handing me a glass. I forced a smile. "Sure." We ate in silence for a while, the city lights flickering below our balcony. Then he finally asked, "So, are we good?" I set my fork down. "I don't think we are, Daniel." His brows knitted. "Because of the Hannah thing again." "Yes," I said, voice calm but firm. "It's not just about her, it's about how you treat me. Like I'm an obligation, not a choice." He sighed, leaning back. "You always do this, turn small things into drama." Small things, I echoed. You club with your ex every weekend, and I'm supposed to be okay with it. He smirked that same condescending smirk that made my stomach twist. You're blowing this out of proportion. You know what? If you can't handle my social life, that's on you. I nodded slowly. Maybe it is. He looked confused for a moment, unsure if I was agreeing or surrendering. I'm done arguing, Daniel, I said quietly. I just want peace. Peace, he scoffed. You're being dramatic again. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll be somewhere quiet while I do it. He laughed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing you'd understand right now. I cleared the plates and went to bed early. He stayed up scrolling through his phone, probably texting Hannah, the glow of his screen reflecting off the walls like a ghost. That night I packed a small suitcase, just the essentials: clothes, laptop, a few favorite books, the framed photo of the ocean I'd always loved. I left out everything else because I didn't want the weight. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and slid my phone under the pillow. When the alarm buzzed, the city was still half asleep. I got dressed in silence, grabbed my bag, and paused for a moment at the doorway. Daniel was asleep, mouth slightly open, his arm hanging over the edge of the bed. He looked peaceful, familiar. But I didn't feel guilt, only calm. I slipped out quietly, called a cab, and watched the skyline fade as we drove toward the airport. At the terminal, I glanced at my boarding pass. Seabrook, a coastal town he said I'd never survive in. Maybe he was right about one thing: I wasn't made for chaos. I was made for peace. And this time I wasn't asking for permission to find it. The plane ride to Seabrook felt like an out-of-body experience. I watched the city shrink beneath the clouds, the skyline dissolving into distance, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing toward anything, I was escaping from everything. No long goodbye, no emotional closure, just clean, deliberate silence. I checked into a small seaside rental, a studio apartment with white curtains and a porch that faced the ocean. The sound of waves filled the silence Daniel used to occupy. It was strange how peaceful emptiness could feel. That first night, I slept with the windows open. The air smelled like salt and new beginnings. By the third morning, I finally turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with chaos. 14 missed calls, 23 unread texts, 6 voicemails. The first message came in only hours after I'd left. Daniel, where are you? Your stuff's half gone. WTF, Bella. Then, Daniel, this is childish. Come home so we can talk. Then later that night, Daniel, seriously, you're ghosting me now. After everything. I scrolled without replying. Every line sounded like a performance, not remorse. The voicemails were no better. The first one was calm. Hey, I get you're upset about the Hannah thing, but you're overreacting. Call me. We'll fix it. The second one was sharper. You're being ridiculous, running away like this. Grow up. By the third, his voice cracked. I don't even know what I did wrong anymore. Please just answer. I deleted them all. Silence became my weapon. For weeks, I lived quietly. Mornings spent walking along the sand, afternoons, working remotely from a cafe that smelled of espresso and ocean air. I got to know the locals: a barista named Claire, an old man who fed seagulls near the pier, a painter who rented the unit below mine. None of them asked about my past. Every morning, the horizon reminded me of how far I'd come. Then 2 weeks later, the message that changed everything arrived. Daniel, Hannah was a mistake. We hooked up once, okay? It meant nothing. Please, let's talk. I read it 3 times and put the phone face down. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt nothing. Because deep down, I already knew. The moment he started defending her, I'd felt the betrayal forming. I'd just been too scared to face it. Now I had proof and peace. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a long walk along the coast. The wind was sharp, the waves relentless. I thought about how many times I'd stayed quiet in our relationship, mistaking composure for weakness. But silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's survival. That night, I cooked for myself something simple, something just for me. I opened a bottle of wine, played soft music, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to come home. Days turned into weeks. The messages slowed, then stopped. But when peace settles in, it doesn't mean the past disappears. It just stops shouting. One afternoon, I was working from the porch when my phone rang again. Unknown number. I didn't want to answer, but curiosity won. Hello, Bella, it's Sarah. It took me a second to place the voice: Daniel's best friend. The one who used to text me group memes and double date plans. Hi, Sarah, I said carefully. Her tone was sharp. Look, Daniel's a mess. You can't just vanish like that. It's cruel. I didn't vanish, I replied. I left. Same thing, she snapped. You know he's been calling everyone. He's not eating. He says you just disappeared without saying a word. I took a slow breath. Sarah, he made choices. I made mine. He made one mistake, Bella. People can fix things. Then let him fix them with Hannah, I said. Silence stretched between us. You're being selfish, she muttered finally. Families work through things. You just cut him off. I smiled faintly. That's the difference. We weren't family. He was just someone I stopped mistaking for one. Then I hung up. After that, I blocked her number too. Every attempt to drag me back into the past felt like quicksand, and I was done sinking. A month passed. My freelance work expanded. I picked up a consulting gig with a local tech startup. The founder, a kind woman named Nora, noticed the peace I carried. "You're not from here, are you?" she asked one day. I smiled. Not anymore. Slowly, the pain turned into clarity. I realized that Daniel hadn't ruined me, he'd redirected me. He'd called me safe, predictable, boring. But what he really meant was that I refused to worship chaos, and the irony his chaos had consumed him. From what little I heard through mutual contacts, that Daniel's world was unraveling. Arguments with Hannah, missed work deadlines, late-night outbursts. Someone said he'd been seen leaving a bar, yelling into his phone. Maybe he was calling me. Maybe not. It didn't matter, because by then I had already rebuilt something he could never touch. Myself. At night, I'd sit on the porch, a mug of tea in hand, and listen to the sea roll in and out like a steady heartbeat. There was no noise, no arguments, just stillness. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from someone finally admitting they hurt you. But now I know closure comes the moment you stop needing them to. I never planned on finding out what happened to Daniel after I left, but gossip has a strange way of drifting back to you like sea foam carried by the tide. It started with an email from one of our old mutuals, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. The subject line read, "You were right." Curiosity won. Inside was a short message. "He's a mess. Hannah dumped him. Drama everywhere. You dodged a hurricane." I stared at the screen, then closed my laptop slowly. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even surprised. Just relieved. Over the next few weeks, little updates kept reaching me through the grapevine. Apparently, after I left, Daniel and Hannah made their situationship official, or tried to. They became the IEI couple in their friend group for a short, shiny moment. Nights out, Instagram stories, glittering smiles that masked disaster. But chaos doesn't last, not when it's built on ego and denial. The same charm that once drew Hannah back started to grate on her. She was wild, unpredictable, and Daniel, well, he needed someone to blame for everything. When his firm cut his hours for missing deadlines, he turned to her angry defensive. Rumors spread of public fights in bars, tears in parking lots one night, where she left crying, and he followed shouting down the street. Someone even told me Hannah called him the same boring man he always was. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, Seabrook had started to feel like home. I'd fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, almost cinematic. Mornings on the beach with coffee and headphones, the world tinted pink by sunrise. Afternoons consulting from a co-working space by the docks. Evenings spent sketching, journaling, sometimes just staring at the horizon. There's something humbling about living by the ocean. It doesn't care who you were before. One morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Bella." The voice was instantly familiar, Daniel's mother. "Oh," I said softly. "Hi, Mrs. Reed." Her tone was clipped, polite, but tight. "He's not himself. He says you left without a word." I stayed silent. "You've always been the reasonable one," she continued. "Whatever happened between you two families, work things out. You shouldn't just walk away." That word again, shouldn't. "Mrs. Reed," I said gently with respect, "I'm not family. Not anymore." She huffed. "You young people give up so easily. He's trying." "Trying would have meant not lying," I replied calmly. There was silence on the line, then a sharp exhale. "You always did think you were better than him." I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "No, ma'am. I just finally stopped thinking less of myself." Then I hung up. That evening, I went for a long walk along the shoreline. The wind had picked up rougher than usual, whipping my hair into my face. I thought about how everyone around Daniel seemed to carry the same disease, the belief that women were supposed to endure. Endure neglect, endure humiliation, endure disrespect in the name of loyalty. Not anymore. A week later, another familiar name appeared in my inbox. Sarah, again. "He's been drinking too much," she wrote. "Says he misses you. Maybe you should at least talk to him. He's not doing well." I hovered over the reply box, then typed 3 words. "Not my problem." Then deleted her message and blocked her for good. I'd stopped needing to prove my piece to anyone. Because peace isn't the absence of pain, it's the decision to stop reopening the wound. That night, rain hammered against the windows, and I sat curled on the couch with a blanket and a journal. I wrote for hours, not about Daniel, but about what I'd learned. How love without respect is just dependency wearing perfume. How silence can scream louder than words. And how sometimes karma doesn't look like revenge. It looks like freedom. I didn't find out all the details right away, but months later, through another mutual friend, I heard the final twist. After Hannah left, Daniel tried to chase her down again. She blocked him. He lost his job entirely soon after burned bridges, missed meetings, too many excuses. He moved back in with his parents for a while, tried freelancing, but it didn't last. Guess he's living off savings now, the friend said. No one wants to work with him. He's changed. Changed how I asked. The friend hesitated. He's quieter, looks tired all the time, keeps saying you were the best thing that ever happened to him. I didn't reply, because maybe that was true, but it was no longer my burden to carry. In Seabrook, the world kept spinning. I found new friends, started hiking on weekends, even joined a small art collective by the shore. There were bonfires, laughter music that didn't sting of betrayal. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the painter downstairs, Lucas, handed me a cup of cocoa and asked, "So what brought you here?" I smiled. A mistake. He laughed. The best kind, I hope. Eventually, yes, I said. Because every wrong turn, every heartbreak had led me here to stillness, to freedom, to a version of myself Daniel would never recognize. When I went home that night, I sat by the open window, watching the moon ripple over the water. My phone buzzed once briefly with another unknown number. I didn't look. I didn't care. I'd stopped listening for the echoes of a life that wasn't mine anymore. 6 months passed. By then, the sharp edges of everything that happened had dulled into memory, like sea glass, smooth but still recognizable. I was happy again. Not the dizzy, desperate kind of happiness that depends on someone else's validation, but something quieter, stronger. My consulting work was steady. I'd built a small circle of friends who didn't know me as Daniel's girlfriend, but as Isabella, the woman who laughed too loudly at beach bonfires and always carried sunscreen in her bag. And then came the wedding invitation. It was for Maya, one of our mutual friends back in the city. She and her fiancé had been together as long as Daniel and I once were. The card was simple, handwritten with a note at the bottom. I know it might be awkward, but it would mean a lot if you came. Everyone will be there. Everyone. That word lingered. I thought about ignoring it, but something in me wanted to go, not to confront, not to prove anything, but to stand there as living evidence that I had survived him, that I had grown beyond the small world he trapped me in. So I RSVP'd yes. The wedding was held in late spring in a garden outside the city. Rows of white chairs, a string quartet playing something soft, the scent of lilies floating in the air. I arrived with someone beside me, Ethan, a friend from Seabrook who'd become more over time. Ethan was nothing like Daniel. He was steady in the way that didn't demand reassurance. He listened more than he spoke. When I told him where we were going, he simply said, "You don't owe anyone a version of your past." I smiled, touched his hand, and whispered, "I know." When we arrived, the whispers started. Familiar faces from the old circle smiled politely, their eyes flicking between me and Ethan. The kind of looks that said, "She's really here." I caught sight of Daniel before he saw me. He stood near the bar, alone, a drink in his hand. He looked different. Thinner, tired, his hair unkempt, like he'd stopped trying to impress anyone. The arrogance he once wore like a jacket was gone. In its place was something heavier, regret, maybe. When his eyes found mine, he froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The string lights reflected off the glass in his hand, trembling slightly. Then he walked toward me. "Bella," he said softly, as if testing the name. "You look different." "I am," I replied. He gave a small, nervous laugh. "Guess that's what peace does to people." I didn't reply. "Can we talk?" he asked after a pause, privately. Ethan looked at me silent but protective. I nodded. "Just a minute," I told him, then followed Daniel to the edge of the garden. The air there smelled faintly of rain and champagne. Daniel shifted, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to when he was uncomfortable. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't weird," he started. "But seeing you here, it brought everything back." I waited. He swallowed. "I messed up Bella. With you. With everything. Hannah, she was a disaster. She cheated on me with some guy from her agency. Said I was too needy." He laughed bitterly. "Can you believe that, too needy?" I didn't respond. He looked at me, eyes glossy. I lost my job, lost friends. My parents barely talk to me. I don't even know who I am anymore. I crossed my arms, the soft fabric of my dress brushing against my skin. That's what happens when you build your life around noise, I said quietly. He nodded, defeated. I know, you warned me. I just didn't listen. Silence stretched between us, broken only by distant laughter from the reception. Bella, he said finally, voice trembling. Can we start over? I'm not asking to jump back into anything. I miss you. I miss how safe you made everything feel. There it was again. That word. Safe. I took a deep breath. You don't miss me, Daniel. You miss who you were when I still believed in you. He blinked, stunned. You called me predictable, I continued. Too safe. But here's the thing, you mistook stability for boredom. You mistook my kindness for weakness. And now that chaos has finally caught up to you, you want the calm back. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I'm not angry anymore, I added softly. But I'm not coming back. He looked down, nodding slowly, his voice breaking. So that's it. After everything, I smiled faintly. That's exactly it. Behind us, the music swelled. Guests started gathering near the archway for the ceremony. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan walking toward us, sunlight catching the edges of his suit. Daniel noticed him too. His face tightened. Is that your new guy? Yes. He let out a short, humorless laugh. He looks like the kind of man you always said you wanted me to be. I tilted my head. He is. Ethan reached me, placing a gentle hand on my back. Everything okay here? Perfect, I said, smiling up at him. Daniel's jaw flexed. So this is what you wanted, huh? Me broken, you happy? I met his gaze calmly. No, Daniel. I wanted both of us to grow. You just chose to wilt instead. He didn't have a comeback for that. As the ceremony began, I turned and walked away, Ethan beside me. Behind us, Daniel stood still, a ghost watching the living. Under the arch of white roses, I took Ethan's hand and whispered, "Thank you for being patient with me." He squeezed it gently. You don't owe me gratitude for healing, Bella. Just honesty. For a moment, I looked up at the string lights swaying in the breeze, the laughter, the promise of new beginnings. I realized this was what peace looked like when it finally settled. It didn't roar. It hummed quietly in your chest. When we left that night, Daniel was still there alone near the bar, staring into his empty glass. Our eyes met one last time. I gave him a small nod, not of forgiveness, but of finality. It was over, truly finally over. 6 months later, the air in Seabrook felt different. Warmer, lighter, like even the wind had started breathing easier. I had too. The city Daniel, the heartbreak. It all felt like a previous lifetime now, something I could study with detachment, not pain. I woke up every morning to the sound of waves brushing against the shore, seagulls bickering in the distance, and sunlight spilling through the curtains. My life had become a rhythm I could trust, steady, gentle, free of the chaos I once thought was normal. Ethan and I had grown closer in ways that felt effortless. He didn't try to fill silence with empty words. He let it exist like a shared secret. We'd spend evenings walking barefoot on the beach, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We'd just watch the horizon fade into gold and know that peace could look like this. One evening, as we sat on the porch with mugs of tea and a blanket draped over our knees, Ethan turned to me and said, "You've changed, you know." I smiled faintly. How so? You used to look like you were waiting for something, someone. Now you just exist. It's beautiful. His words lingered long after he said them. Because he was right. I'd spent years waiting for Daniel to grow up, to understand, to love me the way I loved him. But waiting isn't the same as hoping. Waiting is what you do when you've stopped moving. And I was finally moving again. A few weeks later, Ethan suggested a short road trip up the coast. There's a spot I want to show you, he said with a mysterious grin. We drove for hours, windows down the ocean, flashing beside us in ribbons of blue. We stopped at a cliffside overlook just before sunset. The view took my breath away, waves crashing below sky, painted in streaks of orange and pink. When I turned to look at him, he was already holding a small velvet box. My breath caught. "Bella," he said softly, voice trembling in the wind. "I don't want to rush what we have. I just want to promise you something that no matter what happens, I'll never make you feel small for wanting peace." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, no diamonds, no extravagance, just honest, unpretentious beauty. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. I nodded, tears blurring the horizon. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. He laughed, sliding the ring onto my finger, and the world came rushing back, the sound of waves, the salt in the air, the steady beat of my heart. As we stood there, the sunset wrapping around us like a curtain call, I thought about how far I'd come. I remembered Daniel calling me safe, predictable, boring. The irony of it made me smile. Because safety wasn't the absence of adventure, it was the foundation that allowed it. Predictability wasn't dull, it was peace, disguised as stability. And boring. Maybe boring was just what it looked like when you were finally happy. That night, back at our little seaside apartment, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote one final entry. He said I was too safe, but safety built the life I'd always dreamed of. He said I'd never leave, but I learned to fly. And now every sunrise reminds me that some endings are really just quiet beginnings in disguise. I closed the journal and looked at the ocean through the window. It shimmered under the moonlight, endless and forgiving. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand, a social media notification. Someone had liked an old photo of me and Daniel from years ago. I stared at it for a moment, then pressed delete. No bitterness, no nostalgia, just peace. Because closure doesn't always come with an apology. It comes when the silence finally feels like home. I smiled, curled up beside Ethan, and let the rhythm of the waves lull me to sleep. The past had finally stopped calling.